No way. They're actually going to do it. They're actually going to bring in Primmie. That is insane. What's up, YouTube? Chobra here, and we are back with another week of VCT Pacific Power Rankings and Pickems. We just wrapped up the regular season. We've known our 6 teams going into playoffs for just a little bit, but now, of course, all the seeding has settled, and we have our bracket of the top 6 teams gunning for a spot to go to Champion Seoul. And as you just saw, there's some craziness already going on going into playoffs. So I'm recording this as soon as I got back from the dentist. The left side of my mouth is like still numb. I can't feel it. I probably can't talk properly, but it doesn't matter because I want to get this out there as soon as possible. So we're not going to wait until the Challengers Korea watch party. We got to talk about the teams going into playoffs. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so on the left side, you see where I was rating the teams and their overall power ranking going into the last week of the regular season, or the regular split, the regular stage, whatever we're calling it. And then now we're going to go through what we expect to see going into playoffs. Now, originally I had a lot I wanted to share with all the teams that didn't make it into playoffs as well, because pretty much all of them made quite a few changes or a lot of improvements. I think they showed a lot of improvements. So there's a lot to discuss. However, obviously they're not playing anymore, so I think we can give them that send-off after playoffs is over. I would rather focus on the 6 teams going into playoffs right now. So I just have the predetermined power rankings here. Just because there is a change, I'll touch on that. I think ZETA Division now, sticking with Hero Run on Sentinel is really good for them. I think it overall just brings up the average so much more. Hero Run so much more reliable, way more consistent. He's playing more confident. And while Laz may not have as much impact as he normally gets to do on Sentinel when he compared to now when he is on Initiator, I still think overall this average is better, right? Because now the other veterans also don't have to rely on or worry about Huron's performance each map. So overall, I think that looks better. So I think the team average gets higher, which to me, I rate that a little bit higher than, say, DFM, who is playing, who is learning to play around May. But at the end of the day, you're playing around one guy, one amazing powerhouse, but one guy. So I rate, if we did have another stage 3, let's say, I think ZETA Division might have a better chance of going further. So that's why there's a shift. So ZETA moves up, which means the other 2 move down. For now, let's focus on the teams going to playoffs. Again, we'll discuss my overall thoughts in retrospect of these 5 teams after playoffs. Going into playoffs. Okay, so I'm going to talk about each team individually before we go into the rankings. But we'll go in, I guess, relative order of where they were last year, I said. So, Paper Rex. They continue to look very strong. They continue to look very dominant as one of the most individually talented teams, I would say overall in VCT, but definitely in VCT Pacific. I would say that I agree with the fans saying that, okay, they started to show a little bit of the lack of discipline, a little bit of messiness, a little bit of overheating towards the end of the regular split. Once they were confirmed for playoffs, and then once they got confirmed for Champion Seoul, just even off of championship points, it started to get a little too W gaming again, and I agree. I also think it's very clear that some of their compositions, some of their maps still need a lot of work. So the same weaknesses are, okay, they're still there for Paper Rex that have always been there. The map pool, and then therefore, or, kind of as a result of that, the over-aggression, the reliance on individual mechanics, things like that. But I will also say some of these last matches, I think Paper Rex was getting some of their buttons pressed, right? I think some teams have now realized that if you can force that out of them, that's where you get them to actually act now predictably in the aggressive fashion, now that we've seen it for so long. And then you can try to counter that, right? You can try to pick them off, because I would say the overall individual level of play has increased a lot in Pacific. So, for instance, their match against RRQ, I'm not going to say that either team was playing perfectly, but I think there were several rounds where RRQ was forcing Paper Rex to go back to their de facto, hey, let's take this fight, let's take contact, and then go from there. They forced him into that position, which forced Paper Rex to react, aggressively, and then RQ would force him into bad positions and back and forth, and, Paper Rex would have to rely on heroics, etc., etc. However, I would say there are also rounds where it can't be denied that Paper X's strength is the individual strengths, right? It's the fact that it's their individual strengths and their ability to trade, and their ability to kind of force this fear onto their enemies. So I think there were also several rounds where they used that to their advantage. And these are plans that can backfire, but a lot of plans in Valorant can backfire. A lot of the best plays in Valorant are often based on risks, right? There's a risk reward scale. Just playing the quietest, most textbook clean Valorant does not win you trophies at the end of the day. So, PaperX, acting like they're gonna take a fight and then just leaving one guy there, and then everyone rotating over to the other side. But that instills this fear of like, whoa, well, PaperX, like, they would come out, double or triple, and they would fight us. So let's not take that fight. Things like that, where they would start to go with this conditioning, et cetera, et cetera. So I still think that they recognize what their strengths are, and they're trying to find better ways to weaponize it, per se. But obviously, the map pool, a little iffy. The Haven, the Ascent, questionable. So we shall see. At the end of the day, I do think their overall strength still carries them pretty far here in Pacific. Then let's talk about GENG. GENG, I mean, first of all, Team Secret beat them. And I think they beat them fair and square. Now, I do think GENG, they have to have more in the tank. They have to. If they didn't, I would be sorely disappointed, right? Because we saw the same thing in Stage 1, etc., where I'm not saying that they have to have like entirely new comps, etc., but just a bit more variation in their playbook, just a bit more. The way GENG plays, you could literally add like one or two extra plays or like one or two variations, and that would get you so far, because at the core, their entire playstyle is based on a very fundamental concept. They play very heavy 4-1 defaults, things like that. So I'm not saying that I expect GENG to come out with all the craziest compositions, but we didn't even see much of that. Now, the same thing happened in Stage 1. For everyone that's doom and glooming, same thing happened in Stage 1. They got back from Masters Madrid. They went all the way to the finals at Masters Madrid. And then they looked very haphazard, not a lot of new things. People were getting the read on him. They were playing the exact same rotations on the exact same timings, and everyone got a read on that. And then they were almost eliminated from playoffs. They lost to T1, which qualified T1 to Shanghai. And then they just like turned on a switch, on the second map against DRX. And then they just bulldozed through. And then they went all the way to win Master Shanghai. So this is a team that will gladly take their time to download things. Now, I'm not saying that they were like purposely necessarily like hiding a ton of strats, but I also don't think they were necessarily pressed to show everything they had, because they're still in relative comfort to make it to champions. Now, there's a crazy world where both them and PaperX get eliminated, and then GENG wouldn't make it to champions, but that's like pretty crazy, despite the increase in skill level here in Pacific. So I'm just gonna say that I don't think GENG necessarily went into that match being like, hey, like, don't show anything, just play normally. If we lose. I don't think that was the mindset, but I also don't think they were like, we gotta pull out everything we had. I also think they probably actually didn't have that many things fully solidified where they might have felt comfortable pulling it out, right? Things could still be in the oven. They could still be cooking, and it might just not have been finalized. Then there's also the aspect of the map pool changing and Abyss coming in. Who knows how much time they're spending on it. PaperX, we talked to Coach Alex on the Korean analyst desk in their match against RQ, and they talked about how Coach Alex talked about how he, they had to ban Split because they put it on the back burner because they've been working on Abyss, trying to prepare themselves for playoffs, and then going into champions. So I don't know, maybe there's some of that for GENG as well. Who knows? But yeah, so the match between them, between GENG and Team Secret, I think it fully solidifies my hope and faith in Team Secret, but I don't think it's enough to doom and gloom GENG, right? I think GENG is still GENG. I think now we're seeing that, okay, individual strength really, really has been upgraded in Pacific. So GENG can't just get away on contact plays for as much as they did in the first half of the year. But I'm also just going to have faith that GENG is still going to have the determination and enough of the playbook and enough of the reads to get back into the swing of things, right, when push comes to shove. Whereas Team Secret, I think, okay, I still think that was an upset, but I think they proved that it was a very fair and square upset win. I think Team Secret played very well and went to overtime. And listen, they even had a very shaky Jeremy it was very clear that Jeremy was just having a breakdown, because it's not like he just whiffed one or two op shots. Like, he was whiffing op shots at the end of that match on split, and then he was like missing blast packs. You could tell that he was frantically trying to decide what decision to make. And to me, it actually kind of pained me to watch it, because it reminded me so much of RB at Masters Reykjavik in 2022, where that's when Zeta Division made their third place run. And in the match against Zeta Division where DRX got eliminated, it was actually on split as well. And you could tell, like, RB, the nerves got to him. He couldn't hit his op shots. He couldn't decide, like, where to position himself with the op. And he got so much flack from that. And obviously, he overcame it. He became one of the best flex players that we've ever seen. But to me, it felt very similar. It was just this, once we saw the first part of it, every time we would switch to Jeremy's view, I'm just holding my breath, because I'm like, come on, man. Like, you just got to hold on. Like, you just got to hold on, right? Win or lose. Like, you can't let it slip all away. And it was very clear that it was slipping away very quickly from Jeremy. But despite that, now with Wild Oreo and 2GE on top of Envy, and even on top of Jesse Vash, who has become, I would say, more consistent than last year, which is crazy just given his overall career, they were able to pull through, right? So, you know, I think it's a similar story where, okay, the weakness of maybe Jeremy buckling under pressure a little bit, yeah, that's still there, but I think their playstyle has gotten a bit more varied, right? Coach Dummy talked about it on our analyst desk, where he talked about wanting to add more layers. I think we're seeing the effect of that. I think they're choosing correct rounds where they want to give a little bit more freedom to individual decisions, where they want to get a little bit more aggressive. And then you still have the basis of, like, really good anti, just really solid defaults, kind of safe defaults, things like that. So I think Team Secret and GENG basically just kind of showcased most of what we've seen and kind of hoped from Team Secret, I would say, in that match. But now we're seeing, okay, the roster upgrades were good, and they're able to punch above their weight for sure. So that's where I stand with that. All right, now let's talk about 4, 5, and 6. RQ, DRX, and Talon. So these three teams, first of all, we're going to talk without considering Primmie, because that's a whole different curveball. But I think they all have pretty distinct strengths. But I would say that they have similar weaknesses, which is inconsistency. I think the inexperience shines through these teams a bit more than, say, Team Secret, although they have, you know, someone who also it's their first time on the tier 1 stage, like Wild Oreo. He has been very consistent throughout stage 2, so I don't think we can really take that away from him. But these teams, you know, when I say inconsistent, I don't necessarily mean that they're like whiffing shots. But for instance, RQ and Talon, I think, definitely suffer from overheating still. I think a couple of members kind of have a tendency to overheat, and then once they overheat, their teammates overheat, and it becomes this domino. So I would say that's a pretty clear weakness from them. And then DRX, I would say it is a little bit of that inconsistency in terms of individual performance. However, ever since they just said, all right, screw it, we're going back to flashback on Sentinel, Foxy, I'm sorry, you got to play flex, it's actually been a little bit better. It's kind of similar to Zeta putting Hero on Sentinel, as flashback has now looked very comfortable back on Sentinel. He'll still pick up the Clove every now and then, and Foxy's, you know, flash initiators, etc., has definitely gotten a lot better than it was in the beginning of the year. So DRX, I think, they're back on an upswing. They had a bit of a dip. They're back on an upswing. They obviously have the mechanical prowess, and Mako's been talking very openly about how he's picking up IGLing. He's learning. There's a lot to learn, but he is learning it, and I think it's fairly apparent in the matches we watch them play. And then you have Buzz, who is he's insane. Like, he'll make rounds happen. He's that guy, which is why I love him. He's that guy. I've always said this about DRX. Buzz is one of the most valuable players they have on that roster, because he's that guy who can just flip a match on his own, like individually. And it's not that he just needs frags. Like, the reason I like Buzz is because he is a crazy X factor that creates space. Sometimes it's through frags, and that's his goal. So if he's getting frags, it's to create space. If he's going in and sacrificing himself, it's to create space. But he will choose the right way to create space to make sure they win, no matter how bad things look, which is an insane skill to have, and it's crazy confidence. So I think DRX still has that huge strength, but obviously their playbook a little bit lacking. I think the comps and their tendencies a little bit more readable, especially with flashback going back to Sentinel, etc. So we'll see. And then individually, still a little bit up and down. Now RQ, I think they've really figured out their own style, kind of a mix between the old DRX and Paper X. So a little bit in between. I think they've overall individually, I would say, have gotten a lot more consistent. I think Estrella still has some very quiet games. He's very up and down, but when he turns on, he's on for sure. But Estrella is probably, in terms of individual mechanics, the weakest link. Now, he is IGLing, but we're in a meta where IGLs don't really have that excuse anymore. You do have to at least frag. You don't have to be top fragging for sure, but you do have to frag. So we'll see if they can make that a bit more consistent. But I mean, I'm always so scared because Xfera and Elmimore, like, they're great until they have that one game when they're not. So hopefully that doesn't come up anymore for them going into the playoffs. As I think that would be a little bit concerning. But aside from that, I mean, Monyet, I think, has been great for this team. He's bringing in a lot of energy. He allows him to play the Neon. His Neon is really solid. He's one of the better Neons in Pacific IMO. And then Jemkin's Jemkin. You know, he's consistent. He may not be as flashy as something, but he'll still put up very, very similar numbers, very respectable numbers. He'll quietly do his job. But that's the thing. I think the difference between RQ and DRX is, I think currently RQ looks like a more stable team, like a more complete team than DRX. But Buzz's X Factor, I think, is actually bigger than Jemkin's. And this doesn't necessarily mean that Buzz is just like a straight up better player individually. Actually, I think it's kind of hard to compare those two. But Jemkin, the way Jemkin plays is very, like, he actually plays individually very textbook, and he's very skilled at it. But he won't just like dig in and suddenly pull out a miracle, right, out of nowhere. And like on rounds where maybe you felt that they didn't necessarily need it, like it was just a lost round, you can let it go, or it's a lost situation, you can let it go. Like, he doesn't make those things happen necessarily. And maybe it's a team thing, maybe it's an individual thing, I don't know. But I would say that RQ probably lacks a bit of that oomph. Like Xfera and Elmimore, I think I sometimes have that. And like Jemkin will have highlights, but it's a little different. So that's probably partially their weakness. And then Talon, their biggest weakness to me was that I love that they're cooking. I mean, I love people who cook. I love people who cook. But it almost feels like the players still can't digest what they're cooking. Like, they can't digest their own dishes. Which is a problem, right? If you're the chef, you want to make sure that you can eat your own food and you're fine with it. But there are times where we can just see that, okay, whether it's individual comfort on an agent, on a position, or it's teamwork in this composition, it's like, whoa, it's not quite there. Like, this wasn't ready to come out. The idea was cool. Personally, I love a lot of the ideas they bring out. And I think it's actually really good counters to some of the ways that some of the Pacific teams play. But you know, you're tripping over yourselves. So to me, Talon's biggest weakness is I think they still trip over themselves more than they trip over their opponents, which is, there's pros and cons here, because the pro side of that is that, okay, well, if you can brush it up, then you should be good. Like, you should be good to go. But the downside of that is like, well, now no matter who you're playing against, you could be tripping up over yourselves, right? So it's not forced errors per se. It's more so unforced errors, just because it's either out of comfort or you're overheating. This is another team that has quite a bit of overheating, and then you can tell it gets really messy. And they've talked openly about this, so that's something that they'll need to brush up on. Now that we've said that, it's all about the focus of this video, Primmie. I can't believe they're gonna do this. I had somebody DM me telling me, yo, I think this is going to happen. And then, you know, I watched the Spike Talk episode. Frost is talking about this crazy X Factor that they're going to bring in. And then now he's here. And it's funny because, first of all, I'll just say it. I'm so down for it. I'm like actually kind of ecstatic about this because, listen, you're in a single LM game. If you lose, you're basically out, right? You're not going to champs. So you need to win this because Team Secret is already ahead in championship points. So you get one chance. And if you are, like I said, if your weakness is you're tripping over yourselves, then you might as well throw a Hail Mary. I honestly think so. Some people might not like it. Some people might consider, well, it's definitely unorthodox. But if your biggest weakness is yourself anyway, you might as well chuck the hardest pitch you've ever thrown to see if you can land it, right? Like, you might as well, because you get one shot. So Primmie's coming in. Now, this raises a lot of questions. I know Plat Chat talked about it a little bit as well, but this raises the question of like, okay, so were they testing swapping roles because they've been practicing with Primmie and, you know, they're trying to prepare for that? Or, you know, or are they just preparing totally other comps and they're just playing whatever they played, you know, they had prepped at the beginning of this season and that's why it's all over the place? Like, where's this all going? I mean, who knows? There's probably some truth to all of that. We just don't know how much, like what the percentage is. But first of all, Primmie is pretty cracked. If you're in Pacific, you've probably heard his name get thrown around. And I watched some of his gameplay, and it is clean. It's clean. It's like it's reminiscent of, you know, your Charons, your Woots, your, you know, Alpha Air when he first entered and things like that. It's so good. He's so good. Now the question is can he do it on stage? Nobody knows. But I wonder if Frost sees something in his personality, because Frost has gone through a lot of different scenarios and players, right, across different games, where maybe he's seeing something in his personality where you can tell, like, this guy's not going to care about being on stage, or he's going to feed off of the stage, right? There's different types of players that break down on the stage and players that actually feed off of it, which is why the whole, like, well, it's their first time on the stage doesn't actually have as much weight, because it can go both ways. So I don't know, maybe he saw something, or maybe not. Maybe he's, you know, thinking the way I'm talking right now, where it's like, well, you might as well just throw everything you got. Now, the official announcement isn't there, but like he is on the in-game menu, so I'm gonna assume that he's on the team. And if he's on the team now, like, I can only imagine he's playing on Friday. It really comes down to how much scrim practice they've had with Primmie, because here's the thing. I think individually, I'm pretty hopeful that he will perform on stage. I think he'll perform fairly well on stage. The question is does the rest of the team play suddenly break down even further? Like, if they have just as many mistakes as they've always had, but then Primmie comes in and just like aim diffs people, I think that will be the X factor. So yeah, it's probably a matter of things like, if Primmie's playing just like he's always played in all the clips and all the ranked games that people have seen of him, and Talon is either at the same exact team level or maybe slightly better, then I think they go very far. But if they drop even further, it's like, well, maybe now you just barely are able to cross the finish line, if at all. So it's a big question, but I'm like pretty excited about this, because like, if this guy plays the way he does, I think he can diff a lot of people that are in the playoffs right now. I'm not going to say he can diff everyone, especially not on the big stage probably, but I think he can. Now, that begs the question of, well, then who would he be stepping in for? To me, there's only two options. It's only Surf for Governor. Well, I mean, assuming Primmie plays Neon, because if not, then I feel like they would keep Governor for the Neon. So maybe they're doing musical chairs again. Maybe we're just back to square one. Now that I've said that, I don't know. I'm okay with that. To me, Governor is one of the people that overheats the most. That kind of leads the overheating a lot of the times, or at least it feels like it when we're just watching, not hearing the comms. So kind of keeping him away from those roles, right? Keeping him on, you know, flash initiators, etc., where he's like always meant to be setting someone else up and then training. I think that's where he can actually shine more consistently. So I think that works out pretty fine. And then if it's for Governor and Ban is like either double duelist or flash initiator, I think that's fine as well. And then Surf is Sentinel, and then, or like Lurk, then I think that's fine as well. Either one I think works. I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe it's going to be map to map. Who the heck knows? I'm going to do this power ranking with the assumption that Primmie is playing, and with the assumption that Primmie's not going to bomb out. He can, and that would flip the entire thing on its head. But with the assumption that he's not going to bomb out, in which case, ranking wise, listen, I'm still going to put Paper X at the top. I know map pool probably still a little bit questionable, but if they've been putting Split on the back burner for a couple weeks now, already prepping for Abyss, you know, leading to the Split ban, things like that, then I'm going to have faith. The Haven and Ascent is, it's a little, I think the Ascent is going to be fine. I think the Haven is probably going to be the weak point for them still. It always has been. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But listen, I think they were probably limit testing a bit. I think they'll be able to reel it back in just a bit more. I felt like even in the RQ match that their timeouts were always like one or two rounds later than I would have thought. So I'm imagining that they were trying to see if they can really get into a better habit and pattern. So I think they'll be able to still get just consistent enough. And I think they'll still have enough consistent mechanical prowess that they can get by on heroes with enough people, against enough people. Like Mindfreak and Devi are playing so consistently well. Afterwards, I'm going to put GENG here. And the reason I'm going to put GENG still above Team Secret is the same thing. I think that win from Team Secret, if anything, it solidifies my faith that they are in the top 3 strongest looking teams right now. But I'm going to wait to see if GENG really doesn't have much more or not. It's not about Team Secret, but it's more about GENG. I'm still led to believe that I should have faith that they will be able to show a bit more. That they should be able to show a bit more in the coming matches. And that's why I'm going to put GENG above. But I think the gap in between these 3 teams is very small. Because quite frankly, Team Secret, they've very consistently had Paper X's number. And now they've had GENG's as well. So these upsets could happen any day of the week. GENG beating Paper X should not be weird at all, right? So I think these 3 are in a bit of a circle. But this is how I'm going to order them. Now, I think there's a slightly bigger gap between top 3 and the next 3. But even that I don't think is massive. I think this is where the consistency comes into play, right? These teams are just consistently showing their strengths more than these 3. Listen, if Primmie's mechanics can make Frost's crazy ideas happen on stage, then I think they become a really powerful team. Really powerful team. Listen, them bringing in Primmie, to me, it has similar energy to OG's Dota team at TI8. It has similar energy for anyone who watches Dota to Seb picking Axe. Okay, it has similar just Hail Mary wildcard play energy, and it's either going to work or it's not. And if it does, I think it has massive potential. Because if having somebody who can just consistently be the X factor in terms of mechanics, if that's what you needed to make your insanity come to life on stage, then I really think that their comps have great curveball factor. I think they have great curveball factor. So I think they have great creativity factor. So I'm gonna have that faith. In which case, it oddly becomes like this, where I'm gonna put RQ still one step above DRX, but I'm gonna just boost Talon up. And here's the thing: if it wasn't for Primmie, I actually think it would have just been RQ DRX Talon for me. I think RQ is starting to. I think they're one step ahead of DRX in terms of figuring out their current roster. Obviously, they started a bit earlier than DRX did, I would say, on that front. So I also think that their ideas and interpretation right now are in a better direction of the meta, right? Kind of choosing a bit more on when to go for these contact plays, etc. It seems to be much more systematic for RQ already, whereas DRX, they're just now getting into that. They're just now getting into, oh, okay, so in this meta, this is our pace. Like, they've just now started showing that in the very last matches. I'm going to leave them above. I think RQ is just going to be a bit more consistent. I think Xfero and Omimore have really found their footing. I think Magnet has found his footing. Also, the ability to play the Neon, I think, gives them a lot of strengths. So that's what. But here's the thing. Again, gap between these three, practically non-existent, quite frankly. They kind of have counters to each other, in my opinion. So it's a bit of a circle again, and so I think it's pretty much non-existent. This is just how I'm going to rate them. But to me, it's like bottom three versus top three in the playoffs. But even there, the gap is simply consistency. So if it's a good day, if it's a good week, these three could just beat all three of the top three, in my opinion. But those are my power rankings, and now it's time to do our Pickems. Okay, so this isn't entirely final. I was testing it out yesterday, so I was kind of just toying with what I thought, but some of the things are final. So let's start. RQ beating GENG. I'm not changing this. I think it's going to happen. This would be an upset, but to me, it feels similar to Team Secret and GENG. It would be an upset, but I don't think it's that far-fetched. The difference between GENG and Stage 1 and Stage 2 is that now they start in the knockout round. So they don't have as much time to warm up, to download, and then adjust. I think, and therefore this could simply mean like, oh, they're already pressed up against elimination, so this is where they turn it on. That could happen. But I think this also gives RQ a unique opportunity to pressure GENG's weak points, right? And GENG should show newer stuff, but RQ should also be prepped for everything else that's not new, because GENG plays a very fundamental core style. So RQ should have good prep against that. I think RQ has gotten individually up to a point where they shouldn't consistently be pushed, pushed on the weaker side against GENG in terms of individual fights and trades. So I do think RQ has a shot. Now, there are some questions like the Lotus. Like RQ is also one of those teams that's still trying to play the Chamber on the Lotus, and it's a little iffy. Like the Chamber just has to do more if you're gonna do that. So I'm curious what they're gonna do there. I would love to see an agent change on Lotus, but we'll see. So I think in those fronts, it gets a little iffy. And then I would say, but Elmimore and Xfero, okay, rewinding a bit, I would say Xfero and Elmimore have now been given roles in the way they play with the team where they're not really on any map. You're not really relying on them individually winning contact plays every time anymore. There used to be maps like when Elmimore was playing the Chamber, or some of the times where they would have Xfero going on lurks, where it was like, well, Xfero or Elmimore just like has to win fights. They don't really play that anymore as like a core game plan. There are rounds where you're going to look for that, but they don't really play that anymore. And I think that has allowed Xfero and Elmimore to thrive a bit more. I think maybe in the past that pressure got to them a little bit, etc. But we don't see that as much anymore. But there are still compositional questions, right? So I do think this would be an upset still. But I think RQ has a chance. And then there's Abyss, right? GENG's probably going to ban it. So RQ should also have the advantage of knowing like GENG now has to use that ban card. Then Team Secret versus Talon. So this was before Primmie showed up in game on the esports tab, where then I favored Team Secret just because I think Talon they're still gonna overcook a little bit. But guess what? If it's Primmie, I'm loving what I'm about to see. I'm loving it. So we're going to put Talon beating Team Secret. I'm sorry, Wild Ori and 2G are great. Team Secret looks great, but like, listen, I think like Primmie's either going to diff people or he's going to fizzle out. It's like one or the other. There's no middle ground here. And if we're going to work off of that assumption, we might as well assume the more exciting aspect. Then we have Paper X RQ. I do think Paper X should have the edge here. I think map draft is still iffy for Paper X. This is, if RQ does beat GENG, this is probably, there's a good chance we see an Abyss here, like floated to the end at the very least, I think, between these two teams. So that could get interesting. And I think it shouldn't be a one-sided game. I think it should be close. But I think here, RQ, because here's the thing, is that RQ's biggest weakness is that they also have a tendency to overheat, because that is also kind of their core DNA for a lot of their players. Now, the reason I think RQ is strong is they mix in, slow and steady map control style with aggressive style. Like, they have a good balance. But the moment the opponents overheat, and like taunt them basically in game, not intentionally, but taunt them like Talon or Paper X, RRQ just falls into that trap. This is what we saw against both of those teams. So I think RRQ actually is weaker against the crazy teams. Whereas against teams that aren't crazy, that's when them having that balance actually works in their favor. So I think Paper X should still be favored here, but then DRX versus Talon. Oh, we going all the way on the Primmie train. Let's go, baby. We're going all the way on the Primmie train. I mean, listen, I think if Primmie is the answer to beating Team Secret, I think you should expect Talon to beat DRX. I think so. It could be a crazy matchup between Buzz and Primmie, but I think so. And then if DRX falls, again, I think stylistically, this is where RQ should have the edge. I mean, this would be a match where if DRX wins, I would expect it to be off the back of Buzz once again. But I think RQ should be able to do it again. And that would mean that DRX is out of champions because GENG got knocked out. So we're going with the crazy. Oh, and then Paper X versus Talon. Oh. But this is also where Talon could fall into the same trap. Because how many people can Primmie diff? And the thing is like, as crazy as Paper X might get, Devi and Mindfreak have been doing their damnedest to just be solid, to just be the backbone, and they've been doing a pretty damn good job. So I'm going to see Paper X going straight to another grand final here in Pacific. This is where Talon kind of, the brakes are pumped a little bit. Then it goes down into Talon versus RQ. Well, I mean, I don't freaking know. At that point, it's a best of 5. It's a best of 5. It's a best of 5. If it's a best of 5, listen, I gotta favor my RQ. If they've gone this far, I gotta favor them. Because here's the other thing. We're just gonna assume that, okay, well, surely Talon can't, even with Primmie, you can't consistently cook perfection in, all 7 maps. So a BO5, maybe not as favored. I mean, I guess, yeah. So, yeah. I mean, listen, if Talon goes this far and RQ goes this far, it's like, it's anybody's game. If they do go this far, probably, I actually think that RQ should be favored on team play if this like pans out in this bracket, but Talon should be favored in having the tip of the spear, that X factor. So because Talon probably got here on the X factor, whereas RQ probably got here on the team play. So in that sense, maybe in a best of 5 you favor Talon because it's a marathon. But maybe it goes the other way. I mean, who knows? But either way, let's have some fun here. But then if it's Paper X versus RQ, listen, I already gave RQ enough. They've beat DRX again. They've beat DRX. They beat GENG again. They finally overcome their nemesis in GENG. So now it's time to create a new nemesis in Paper X. All right. Paper X still wins Pacific. Nothing changes there. And then we'll see how they all do at Champions. But if it goes this way, the 4 teams going to Champions would be Paper X, RQ, Talon, and GENG off of the championship points. That would be insane. It'd be a huge shift. Quite frankly, just any one of Talon, RQ, or Secret going to Champs, I think would be exciting. If it's 2 out of the 3, I think that's even more exciting. So we shall see. But listen, are there crazies here? I mean, first of all, Talon with Primmie, I mean, who friggin' knows? But I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna go in on the Hail Mary. I'm on for Mr. Frost crazy ride. I'm on for it. I'm feeling the OG TI8 energy. I'm here for it. I'm loving it. I'm gonna ride it all the way to the end, and we'll see how that works out for me. Let's make sure this saves, because sometimes it doesn't. See? Again, it says form invalid. Why is it doing that? Oh, I almost got wrecked again. Maybe it's because I took too long. Maybe that's why. Anyway. All right. Well, chat's not here. I'm recording this. So YouTube, I've given you enough crazy. Tell me which of these things I've said today is the absolute nuttiest thing that should never be spoken again. Let me know down in the comments below. Also, with all this crazy let me know, do you think Talon's X Factor will actually be the breakthrough or not? I would love to hear your opinions, because I know there are some people out there, especially in Pacific, that have been waiting to see Primmie on a big stage. I mean, we don't know for sure if he's playing, but like, I'm going to assume he is. So let's see how this goes. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, always leaving a like and a comment helps so much for the algorithm. And of course, if you like the content, then subscribe, because we're trying to make sure we keep out videos every single week. That's going to be it. I'm going to be at the playoffs for VCT Pacific. One of the days I'm going to be on the Korean broadcast, but all the other days I'll be on the English broadcast, casting, being on the analyst desk. It should be absolutely exciting. Abyss is entering the map pool. There's a lot to look forward to, so I'll see you guys there.